Welcome, everyone, to the Flower Files podcast sponsored by Wildly Native Flower Farm. Here, everyone is welcome to talk with fellow flower lovers, including real perspectives from the farm, the flowers, and me, the florist.
From the messy day-to-day operations down to the details and even business perspectives, this podcast has a little bit of everything to keep it real. We know that life can get crazy and we don't always have the time to spend on what we love, so we are here to help you take a little time to indulge in nature. I'm Liza Getz.
I'm Lizzie Frey, and we are the team that makes this podcast. Every once in a while, we have a couple guests. This business thing and what we are working with is called life.
Join us as we walk you through how to think outside the box, talk from the farmer's perspective, have honest conversations about florals, and how to run, well, life. So listen in.
You can find us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, in the podcast section, and any of your other podcast platforms. You can also find us online at wildlynativeflowerfarm.com, and in an easy way, you can look in the show notes, and all of the information will be right there for easy access for you guys.
So welcome back to the Flower Files, guys, the podcast where we dig into flowers, farming, and the business side of building something beautiful. I'm your host, Liza Getz, flower farmer, florist, and business educator. Today we're talking about something every flower farmer and small creative business owner wrestles with. How do you scale without burning out, and how do you scale correctly? Whether it's expanding production, hiring your first team member, or finding systems that actually work, this conversation is going to be packed with insight. And I've got the perfect guest for this. Ashish Gupta is today our guest, where he is going to guide us a little bit through how small businesses can grow sustainably and smartly. So I hope you guys are ready, because here we go. All right, Ashish, I would love to start with your story. How did you first get into the world of small business and all of the scaling strategies?
Okay. Well, firstly, thank you so much for having me on here. It's an honor, and I'm really fascinated by the type of community that you've built up. So I hope that I can provide some useful insight for those who are listening today. So a little bit of background on myself. I've been in a bit of a different industry most of my career, tech. I've been mostly in tech through the years. I previously started a wireless company. We developed a new wireless technology, and it was one of those like starting in a garage type stories, where we figured out some really cool stuff and then eventually built a business around it and scaled that up and went through all kinds of challenges through that journey, but eventually got it to an interesting point, and that business was acquired by a Fortune 500. And then after that, I was at Apple in senior management in their operations team, the manufacturing, supply chain, procurement team, and managed a pretty sizable worldwide team and a pretty big budget as well every year, a $2 billion a year budget. And eventually, I
That's
had
amazing.
yeah, I guess at Apple everything scale is just like mind blowing. Eventually, I had the entrepreneurial bug again, and I decided to quit Apple, and I acquired a distressed e-commerce business that was in the food space, and spent 4 or 5 years in turning all different aspects of that business around, from the team, the culture, our procurement channels, our sales channels, marketing channels. Eventually, it did turn around, though with a lot of difficulties and challenges along the way, which I'd be happy to dive into.
So what
But
kind of
eventually,
food was it?
sorry?
What kind of food was it?
It's vegan. So, firstly, in the vegan space, I've been vegan for many years, and so it's something that connected with me. And it was snacks. So it was a monthly subscription for vegan snacks to be able to discover new vegan products that are coming to the market.
Awesome. Awesome, awesome. Wow, that's an incredible niche market to begin with. I can see how you would really have to take a lot of time to make sure that you have all of the pieces in place for it to move forward.
Yeah, exactly. And that company eventually, it once it did get in the right track, it was acquired after about 4 or 5 years. It was acquired by a larger competitor of ours, And then after that, I started helping a few small businesses where their founders were stuck, either in terms of their team being burnt out, or they had run out of ideas, their revenues had plateaued, and they weren't sure how to get to the next level. And so I joined as a fractional meaning part-time COO, Chief Operating Officer,
Hmm.
and retooled the businesses. And within 3 4 months, they started growing 30 40%. And eventually, because of that success, I had more engagements as a fractional COO than I could manage myself. And that's when I started our firm, Scale Up Exec. It's still a small firm at the moment. There's about 8 of us on the team, but these are like the folks that have scaled a lot of businesses from 0 to 8 9 figures in lots of different industries, and so we dive in hands on to help businesses scale or just get to the next level. So we've been through a lot of interesting scenarios and situations and worked through a lot of challenges. So it's been fun experience.
What, where, okay, so you sounds like you started at a place where you had to decide to scale. What were some of the factors that you had to consider when you started bringing on team members to make sure that your vision and all of your perspectives and style were maintained?
Yeah, good question. So firstly, it's important to understand who you are as a person in terms of a few things. One is, what are the things that you're good at and not good at? And secondly, what are the things that when you do, you feel motivated by or they give you energy? Versus what are the things when you start doing those activities, they drain your energy? So I think these are actually two really important factors to first understand. And being an entrepreneur or a business owner, it's really important to understand yourself in depth and be openly honest with yourself. Most of us, we feel, especially when an entrepreneur, we can do everything. And we often feel actually very hesitant to even allow others to take over some of the things that are on our plate, because we feel like nobody can do it as well as us. But that's usually not the case. Like, for example, I found that 90% of people or CEOs are either really good at being a visionary or strategist, like meaning you know where you want to get to or where you want to take the business to, but they may not be that skilled at executing the steps to get there. And then the other 90% of people might be really good at that execution work, which I often call operations, but may not be great at vision or strategy. So there's probably maybe only 10% of people out there that are actually good at both of those things. So it's actually good to understand first, maybe you're really good at vision or thinking about the future or where you want to take things, but maybe you have some gaps in execution side. And it's okay. There's nothing wrong with that. We all have our skills and gaps. So if you identify that, now you can actually see, well, who can I bring on that can fill in the gaps for me? So if I know I'm a visionary and I'm not so strong in execution, why don't I go and find somebody who can fill that gap of being a really good executioner, like it can actually get things done. And
I've heard it explained in the past that the strength of a leader is knowing their weaknesses and surrounding themselves with people who have the strength of their weakness. Did I kind of,
yep, that's very
yeah,
good. And in
I,
reality, that's not always practical, though, in terms of, let's say, finances. You may not be able to hire a bunch of people right now. You might only be able to hire one person right now. And or maybe you might only be able to hire one person part-time right now as you're just getting your business started. Maybe at some point in your business's life cycle, you actually can uh, afford to bring on all the different pieces that'll fill in all your skill set gaps. We usually don't just have one skill set gap, we usually have lots of skill set gaps, but there's a
mhm.
phase to all of this. So that's maybe now the third question that I ask myself after skill set and motivation is, what is the needle moving activities that should be done in the business? So let's say I take a, a account of all the activities that I do in a typical week, and I
Mhm.
list them all out, maybe in a quick spreadsheet. I list down all these activities, and then I write down for each of them which are the ones that I'm skilled at, and which are the ones that I'm not skilled at, which are the ones that give me energy and don't give me energy or drain my energy. And then, thirdly, which of these activities are actually important to be done in the business, and which of them are low value work to be done in the business. So, for example, you might realize that once you look at your average week, that you're doing a whole bunch of activities that actually are not moving the needle for your business. Maybe they're just sucking up a bunch of time, but they're not actually that valuable for taking the business forward towards its goals. So it's you actually will want to even start there and say, well, can I cut out some of these things? Or maybe can I delegate some of these things? So even if it's an activity that I may not be that skilled in, but I can easily find somebody else that can do that work. Um, let's say I'm sorry, the other way, maybe I'm skilled at, let's say, bookkeeping as an example. Maybe I'm actually skilled at bookkeeping and updating my QuickBooks or Wave or whatever tool I use, but I can easily find a bookkeeper that can do this at a low cost that I can afford. And so it's actually worth me delegating that off of me so that I don't have to do that.
I think it's important as a small business when you first start. There's so many passion and dreams and things that you're like, oh, I can't wait until I can do this. But as you said, there's all of these little steps along the way that maybe you don't realize that you have to do, or you have to have the skill set for, or you kind of push it to the back and you say, you know what, I'll figure that out later, or I'll learn. And I feel like as you grow in a business, you tend to have to figure out what does give you joy. And even if it may not be something that right at that moment moves the needle, you still have to be able to have a couple minutes a week where you still can touch that space. It's a strange balance of like I love to go out and I love to work in the field. That is one of my personal favorite things to do. But I know that I have to run payroll. I know that I have to, check the marketing plan, make sure the socials, like there's so many other things that I know that are more important. But even if it's just a couple hours here and there, being able to go touch that space where I first got started, most efficient for me, mowing is probably not the best thing, but it also gives me some headspace.
Hmm.
So trying to have that blend sometimes I think is hard too. And letting go. Letting go is so scary. It's so
Mhm.
not of mowing, but but of other pieces. And it's a lot. It's scary. And when there's a mistake, then you try to figure out, is it me? Is it them? Is it us? Is it, where do you find those layers? How do you find tools to do that self assessment? Somebody listening to this today says, I want to do a self assessment and find out what my strengths really are. How do you do that? What's your first step?
Yeah. Well, firstly, there's different ways you could do this. One is like the spreadsheet example that I just gave.
Mhm.
That might be, if you feel that you can be honest enough to yourself to do that assessment by yourself, then that's a good tool. You just create a simple spreadsheet and you write down the each of the activities that you've done in the
Mhm.
last 2 weeks, and then for each of them write down what you're skilled at, not skilled at, motivated on, not motivated on, and then actually moves the needle or not. So, but for some people, I've noticed it's actually a bit difficult to do that themselves. Like either they may not be so self-aware to be able to do that accurately. So in that case, it often is helpful to understand who in your life is close to you, knows you, sees you day in, day out, whether it's a partner, whether it's a close friend, or it's a business associate that you have, or somebody that you've worked with even in the past, like in a past job that you've been closely associated with. I often find if somebody uh, is worked with you, the type of insights they'll have on you will be a bit different than somebody who hasn't worked with you. Let's say it's a spouse that you've never
Mhm.
worked with, like in a professional setting. Your
Mhm.
spouse may have a different set of things that they view about you. They may not actually see you in your work environment. Sometimes many of us are a bit different, or we have different skill sets that we bring to our work environment versus what we bring to our personal relationships environment. So it is useful if in a work type context, if you've had a close connection with somebody, that you just ask them honestly, what are the things that, number one, that you've observed I've been skilled at, and ideally through examples. Like if they can say, okay, could you give me a couple of examples of our time when we worked together where you saw me doing an activity with high skill level? And
Hmm.
honestly, can you also look at the times we worked together? Were there any examples of areas that I had a low level of skill in completing? And it always helps to have specific examples. Firstly, it's easier for somebody to think through, and then it takes away some of the bias.
Hmm.
Sometimes we get biased just because of our emotional connection with people, but if there's real activities that were done, and those can be used to extract out your skill sets, that ends up being much more useful. So I think this could be the second path: is either you self-assess or you ask close colleagues, either from the past or current.
And I think that has to be done in a space where they know that it's safe to say, hey, you're good at this, but we know that you're not so good at this. And you, as the person being assessed, needs to be open to having that open conversation because it's important. It's
Yep.
really important, I think.
Yeah, and actually, you know what? Another side way of doing this, sometimes people feel a bit nervous or anxious to provide you feedback to you personally. They might bias it, especially like let's say you were a manager of them. Very few people are willing to give 100% transparent feedback to a manager. And so one other way you can do it is there are several tools out there. A free one would just be you create your own Google form, but there's
Mm,
also other tools out there that you can get where you can get feedback that is blind. So let's say you come up with a set of questions in a Google form, and then you turn off any tracking, and you just send it off to 5 different people that you have worked
mm.
with in the past closely, and you ask them, hey, here's my goal, here's what I'm looking to do, I'm looking to figure out what my strengths and weaknesses are. And I've come up with this form. Would you be willing to give 10 minutes of your time? It's completely blind. I won't know who wrote what. And I've sent this out to several people. But it would really make a difference if you can provide me on open and honest feedback. And so doing it in a blind way can also help.
Hey there, flower friends. We need to talk about something sweet.
Petal Pantry is our new line of floral salts and sugars made from flowers we grow right here at Wildly Native Flower Farm. Think of a pinch of floral sugar on your morning muffin, a sprinkle of floral sugar on your cookies, or a blossom infused salt to make every weeknight dinner extra fancy.
Best part, it's all natural and made with real farm grown blossoms.
Treat your taste buds and get 10% off your first order today at wildlynativeflowerfarm.com with the code FLOWERFILES.
Now, let's get back to the show.
Woohoo!
So you get the feedback and you know that your business is in a place where you want to scale. How do you start making those steps? I feel like us, for example, we just recently started launching our Petal Pantry, which is culinary florals and salts. So we have those, and we've been, I don't want to say hesitant, but I don't know how else to describe. We've been hesitant in our marketing because we are such a small batch for right now. Everything is small scale. And we know we want to take it to the next level. And we know that we want to take it to where we have a recipe book for people that's not intimidating. Because I feel like sometimes when you say culinary florals, people are like, nope, that's too chef like. I don't want to do that. Um, so if I have 600 jars and the next year I want 6,000 jars, and then the next year after that, and I'm just throwing numbers out there, I want 6 million jars, making sure you have the steps in place and making sure you have the money and all of those things can sometimes feel very daunting. How do you manage that and what do you do?
Yep. Good. Very, very good question. So first is to make sure that the demand is real, that there are
Yes.
actually people that want to buy this. And it's usually I like to do this in terms of tests. So let's say in your case, you've already figured out here's a product that I can make. These culinary flowers I can actually make. I can produce them, and and I like the quality. And there's certain characteristics of this product that I think will be relevant to a certain set of people. So first is you figure out who are the people that would be a relevant customer, or in marketing terms, they call it ICP, ideal customer profile. So, what is that profile of somebody who would be the perfect buyer? So, let's say in your case, if you're trying to go to the consumer rather than to the restaurateur,
See,
you can just
that's the other, like, trying to determine direction, and we can scale larger on this side, but we can scale smaller and more direct sales with more profit on this side. Like, there's so many factors to consider, and that right now, right there, that conversation or comment you just made is a whole other, that's a whole other part of it.
yeah. So the
Sorry,
way
I
that
just
yeah, so I guess the next thing I would do is, let's say you have two different ICPs that might be relevant. One is that B2B, and the second is the B2C, business to business, meaning the restaurants, and the second is B2C, which might be directly selling to consumers. So you've got a hypothesis that there's potentially demand in both of these areas, but I don't know which one is going to be more suitable or more scalable or easier to sell into. I would first do a test rather than going all in either one of them. First, do a test. So let's say in your local area on the B2B route, you figure out what are all the relevant restaurants in that are manageable for you to deliver to, and you might be able to find the owners or the head chefs in those restaurants, and you actually start a campaign. So for the campaign, you'll want to have a few key metrics that you define for success. So firstly, you're going to make this test time bound. So let's say I've got a period of 1 month that I'm going to do this test over, or 2 months or 6 weeks or whatever. In that focused 6 weeks, I'm going to take a few steps. I'm going to first list out 50 or 100 restaurants that are within delivery range from where I am. And I'm going to figure out who the best contact or quote unquote lead is in that restaurant. And then I'm going to find their email address and phone number. And then I'm going to go in and outreach to them. I'm going to try cold calling, cold emailing. I might even go visit these restaurants at a time when I think that that lead might be there and may have some time availability to speak with me. And so I'm going to do this very focused campaign and put all my time and effort in just that defined period of time to try and outreach to them and see which of them can I try and convert into a sale. And in part of that process, I'm going to come up with my price list and the product offerings, the different sizes that I'm going to offer, and the associated prices for all of them, what my delivery fee is going to be, all of that stuff. I'm going to factor in, come up with all my margins and pricing and the products. And then at the end of those 6 weeks, you're going to determine how much effort did it take for me to make how much in sales. And now what is my profit in that? And are any of those repeat purchases or potential for, let's say, a subscription? So
mm-hmm.
maybe one of your product offerings might be actually a monthly subscription to this, and they get a certain amount of quantity that they get delivered every week or 2 weeks or month or whatever is relevant. So in that 6 weeks, you'll hopefully have a body of data of what works, what doesn't work, what type of restaurants are more interested in your product, what type of chefs are more interested or less interested in your product. And now you'll have like a good idea also in terms of your margins. How much money can you make in terms of how much effort you put in to make that money? So you might find that, okay, so this type of restaurant profile and this type of chef profile is most interested in giving me the most return on my investment.
Mm-hmm.
And now, if that makes sense, uh, that will be the end of your test, at least on the B2B side. Now, on the B2C side, you're going to do something similar. So you're going to try and figure out what are some, like over a 2 month period, what are potential sales channels? Who's your ICP there? Is it like within the consumers, the huge consumer space that exists? How do I boil down into a few people that I think could be really interested in this kind of product? And like what is their profile, what kind of age range are they, what demographic, where do
Mm-hmm.
they live, or do they live in rural areas or city areas, what are the other things that they're interested in that might make them interested in this product. So you kind of really define in detail what that ICP looks like here. And then now the next step is for that ICP, let's say you define that I think it's a female who's between 30 and 40 years old and they live in a big city like New York City, and they're interested in XYZ other things that would likely make them interested in this as well. Um, and maybe they hang out a lot on recipe blogs online. This kind of ICP spends a lot of time on recipe blogs. Then maybe you'll start a whole, you'll come up with a couple of tests. So like recipe blogs might be one potential place they hang out. Maybe there's some Facebook groups where they hang out. Maybe there's some Reddit channels where they hang out and they talk a lot about culinary stuff. Now you're going to start some campaigns where over the next 2 months or 6 weeks, you're going to do a bunch of marketing on those channels, whether that's organic marketing or paid marketing or whatever else makes sense. And you have some KPIs to again figure out how many sales are you getting? Are they repeat purchases? What kind of profile of customer is buying more of your product versus less of your product? Or what kind of profile is not interested in your product? And eventually now you'll come up with uh, a return on investment on the B2C
Your
side.
ROI. Yep.
Yeah, and you compare that with your return on investment on the B2B side. I'm guessing for most small businesses that have a product that could be relevant for restaurant, like your product that you just mentioned, it might actually be easier and take less investment, and you'll get results faster going the B2B route versus going to B2C. Usually, B2C route takes more time and effort and investment, and yeah, it's a bit more of a longer term thing. But
I
you might
also think it's also when we're doing B2B, there's infrastructure in place. I know that I can reach out to brokers and they have ins already in those different industries that are already set that's different than business to consumer. Business to consumer it's the wild wild west sometimes. I mean, where there's all of these pockets and all of these different places and all of these you can do this and you can do that and it's yikes.
yeah, it's big. Sometimes you feel like farmers markets are probably the easiest. You just set up a booth, go there. There's already traffic, and
Yeah.
you just focus
Yeah.
on there.
That's good for test groups, that's good for focus, that's good for certain things. And then there's all the permits and I mean
yeah, yeah,
it just snowballs. It becomes this avalanche of information. You're like, "Oh my god, I just wanted to grow some flowers."
yeah.
It's crazy. Crazy, crazy, crazy. So, I heard you at the very beginning when you were describing your story and your path. Multiple things that you've been involved in have had acquisitions. And I'm finding the further I get into business, I'm getting offers for people to, hey, we want to buy your business. Hey, we want to acquire what you're doing. Is that a hidden side of business that I have an undergraduate degree in horticulture. I have a graduate degree in education. I don't have a business specific degree. So I've been surprised by some of the things that I've learned by literally being in business. Is that a common practice in business that maybe some of us in small business just aren't aware of?
Yeah, it's very common. A lot of small businesses eventually get to an exit. Exit is another way of saying acquisition. And there's actually two ways you can have exits. One is, let's say, you in your current role, you want to step away from that role. Let's say you instead want to become an advisor rather than being hands-on day to day in the business.
Mm-hmm.
So you could exit from your current role into, let's say, an advisory role. But in order to do that, you need to make sure there's a really good team in place that can continue sustaining the business, that you can trust, and they'll continue growing the business over time without you having to be involved day to day. But maybe you can still give them strategic advice as an advisor. Um,
Interesting.
that's one type of exit. The second is now, let's say you're looking to retire and you don't have any interest anymore in being involved in the business, or you want to just cash out. Let's say you've built up something that's interesting and you want to get some return on that investment of all those years you've spent in your business. Then you can potentially look to sell your business as well. And many small businesses, even if they have small amount of revenue, do go through an exit event. So if you have 100K in revenue and you're profitable, it is possible for you to sell your business. And one of the key aspects, especially in the small business space, is profitability.
Hmm.
So there's a term called valuation. So what can you actually sell your business for And in the small business space, it might be 3 to 5x of what's called your EBITDA. EBITDA is earnings before interest, taxes, depreciation,
Hmm.
amortization, which basically means if you look at your net income, like the amount of dollars you take home at the end of the day, and you subtract off your own paycheck and you subtract off taxes and some of these things that are not necessarily transferable if somebody else was to buy your business. So let's say if you have 100K in revenue and maybe you make 20,000 of EBITDA profit at the end of the
Mm-hmm.
day, at the end of the year. Now you might be able to sell your business for 3 to 5 times that. So maybe you might be able to sell it for 60 to whatever else thousand uh, to somebody else.
Wow. Wow.
And
Wow. Wow.
and there's lots of ways you can go about looking to sell your business. And one of the easiest is probably going to a business broker. There are a lot of business
Hmm.
brokers that exist, and probably like the most popular website is bizbuysell.com. So on there, you can, a lot of businesses, they look to sell on bizbuysell.com, and they'll take some commission for the sale, and then they'll help you find somebody who's interested in buying. And the other is you
That's
can just,
crazy.
yeah. So actually, that's one of the interesting things with business. It's not just the money, the profit you're making every year that you can get a return with, but it's also just the inherent value of the business. So the fact
Interesting.
you've built up something interesting, you built up a nice intellectual property, you built up a nice product, you built up a customer base that really likes you and knows you. You built up a website that has some traffic coming to it, or a social media presence that has. So these are all things that are valuable assets for your business, and that's
Mm-hmm.
worth, those assets are worth something. So
Because it takes
people
so
are
much
being
work to do.
yeah,
So
and
many hours and just, it's insane. It
yeah,
is
exactly.
insane.
So for some new business owner, instead they could either start a business just like yours themselves, or they could jump a few years ahead and acquire a business for some cash, and then now they're already, like fast forwarded a few years into the life cycle of a business.
Interesting. 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 So, if there was one piece of advice that you had to give people about how to scale their business, what would you say is the most valuable consideration to make?
I think it would be to know yourself,
Hmm.
really know yourself. And that means not just what we were talking about earlier in terms of skills and what gives you energy, but also what you really want out of your business.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe you don't want to scale it, and that's totally okay. Not everybody has to scale their business because scaling requires a lot of personal energy and effort and time and mental space
And infrastructure.
and infrastructure and finances. Yep.
Yeah.
And maybe you just want stability out of your business,
Mm-hmm.
or you want just regular income from your business, and you
Mm-hmm.
don't really care too much about growth. So it whatever it is, whether it is growth or stability, um, just know what you want. Once you know what you want, and then you know yourself in terms of what you're good at or not good at, now you can actually start charting your path to get to where you want to be.
Amazing. Absolutely amazing. Amazing, amazing, amazing. Okay, so I'm going to ask you one last question. This is not related to business. I ask most of my podcast guests this, but if you were going to be a flower, what flower would you be?
Hmm. I would probably be a flower of something that produces a fruit. of
Okay.
Yeah, and I often find, I have a big connection to animals, and actually, even where I stay, we've rescued some cows.
Hmm.
But I find that uh, like fruit bearing trees are,
Mm-hmm.
if you plant a fruit bearing tree, you're not doing that for yourself. You're actually doing it for the future generations. You're actually
Agreed.
for all the animals that come by that can enjoy that and sustain themselves, or even other humans that come by and can enjoy that. So if I was a flower, I'd rather be a fruit bearing flower, like that converts into a fruit eventually, so that it can
I love
hopefully
it.
be of some
I love
some
it. I love
support
it.
to
I love
others.
it.
Yeah.
I love it. Thank you. Thank you so much for taking the time to share your incredible wisdom, your just absolute incredible story, your background with all of your business knowledge. I am confident that the listeners are going to just eat this up and be absolutely phenomenal. Your insights really it really breaks down the big, scary idea of scaling into manageable steps. And before we wrap up completely, where can people find you if they want to learn more?
Yeah, you can always check out my website, scaleupexec.com. And there's even a calendar there. You can book time with me. And I'm happy to share knowledge and insights if I can be of any support to other people. And
Wonderful.
yeah, that's the best place to find me.
Wonderful. 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 So, if you're serious about scaling your flower or your creative business, take one thing you heard today, put it into action this week. Don't just dream it, actually build it. And I know that sounds cheesy, but you have to do it. So make sure to follow our podcast, leave a review, share this episode with a friend or a coworker who's really ready to grow their business. So until next time, keep blooming and keep building.